They had it all: fame, fortune, and faces the world couldn't forget. But behind the cameras and red carpets, these stars were quietly unraveling. Their charm lit up the silver screen, yet offstage, alcohol became their constant companion, and eventual downfall. From wild binges to unrecognizable transformations, these were stories Hollywood never wanted you to hear. This isn't just about fame gone wrong, it's about lives consumed by something far darker. These 10 Golden Age legends were destroyed not by scandal or obscurity, but by the bottle. And their real stories are far more haunting than any role they ever played. Barbara Payton was the kind of star Hollywood was built to showcase: breathtakingly beautiful, full of energy, and effortlessly magnetic. In the late 1940s and early 50s, she shared the screen with names like James Cagney and Gregory Peck, and for a moment, it seemed she had the world at her feet. But behind the camera, Barbara's life was unraveling at an alarming pace. Her relationships were explosive, her personal choices erratic, and soon, her name was more likely to appear in tabloid scandals than in movie credits. As her acting career stalled, Barbara leaned into alcohol, and it didn't take long for the industry to turn its back on her. By the early 1960s, she was spiraling publicly. She was arrested for public drunkenness after being found asleep on a Sunset Boulevard bus stop bench, wearing only a coat and swimsuit. Later that same year, she was picked up again for disorderly conduct at a drunken party. These weren't isolated incidents. They were signs of a slow-motion collapse happening in plain sight. Eventually, Barbara's stunning looks faded under the weight of addiction. She began frequenting seedy bars, relying on handouts, and was rumored to have resorted to prostitution just to survive. At only 39, her body finally gave out, her liver and heart too damaged to keep her alive. By then, she was nearly unrecognizable. Barbara Payton wasn't just destroyed by alcohol, she was forgotten by the very world that once celebrated her. And tragically, her story was just the beginning. Peter O'Toole. Peter O'Toole was a towering figure in cinema. Sharp, magnetic, and utterly unforgettable. With piercing blue eyes and a voice made for Shakespeare, he captivated audiences in films like Lawrence of Arabia and Beckett. But behind his commanding performances was a man locked in a decades-long battle with the bottle. O'Toole's drinking wasn't just excessive, it was legendary. During the filming of Lawrence of Arabia, his benders in Beirut became the stuff of industry lore. He was reportedly intoxicated through much of Beckett's production, and his off-screen behavior often overshadowed his work. One night, he even showed up to a play in Soho, only to realize halfway through that he was the star. His drinking stories became outrageous, almost unbelievable. He once claimed he went out for a beer in Paris and woke up in Corsica. Another time, he said he didn't hear about the assassination of John F. Kennedy until 22 years after it happened. Doctors warned him that alcohol would eventually kill him, especially after he began suffering from abdominal pain and organ damage. He eventually gave up drinking, but the damage had already taken its toll. By the time he passed away in 2013, his once handsome features had withered, his voice had softened, and his body bore the scars of a life lived too hard for too long. O'Toole's wit and talent were never in question, but alcohol took its own toll, quietly stealing pieces of him over time. Bernard Lee. To most filmgoers, Bernard Lee will always be remembered as M, the no-nonsense head of MI6 in the first 11 James Bond films. He exuded authority and calm on screen, a steady hand guiding James Bond through danger. But off-screen, Bernard's own life was crumbling. A series of personal tragedies cracked his foundation. He lost his wife in a devastating house fire, was mugged on the street not long after, and found himself drowning in unpaid debts. Depression followed, and with it, a dangerous dependency on alcohol. His addiction grew so consuming that crew members reportedly had to lock him in his dressing room during breaks to keep him away from the bottle. But even then, Bernard found a way. According to crew accounts, he once hired someone to feed a straw through the keyhole so he could drink undetected. That level of desperation shocked even his colleagues. Richard Burton, himself no stranger to drinking, once admitted that Bernard Lee drank him under the table. Despite the chaos, Bernard kept working, but the signs were there. His once crisp professionalism had dulled. He became slower, more withdrawn, and visibly aged by the constant abuse. Eventually, his body couldn't keep up with the damage. He was diagnosed with stomach cancer, a condition many believed was worsened by his decades of alcohol abuse. He died at the age of 73, remembered by audiences for his iconic roles, but haunted in life by grief and the bottle. John Barrymore. John Barrymore wasn't just a star, he was Hollywood royalty. Hailed as one of the greatest stage and screen actors of the early 20th century, Barrymore came from a family of performers and brought a raw magnetism to everything he touched. Whether playing Sherlock Holmes or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, his brilliance was undeniable. But as his fame soared, so did his drinking. And unlike his carefully rehearsed roles, his descent into addiction was all too real. Barrymore's drinking began early and escalated into something unmanageable. His second wife once caught him trying to drink her perfume when no alcohol was available. As the years wore on, the effects became impossible to hide. By the mid-1930s, his memory had deteriorated so badly that he needed cue cards to get through his scenes. The once great actor was now slurring lines, stumbling on set, and often playing drunken characters that hit uncomfortably close to home, especially in Dinner at 8, where he essentially portrayed a version of himself. His health spiraled alongside his career. Barrymore suffered from cirrhosis, kidney disease, and chronic edema. His hands shook uncontrollably, and his once commanding presence was reduced to a fragile shell. In 1942, at just 60 years old, his body gave out completely. The man once called the Great Profile had been ravaged by the very addiction he could never conquer. His tragic fall was a warning to the entire industry. Dennis Price. Dennis Price was the epitome of British elegance, witty, poised, and devastatingly charming. Born into aristocracy, he brought a refined presence to every role he played, most notably in Kind Hearts and Coronets, where he starred alongside Alec Guinness in one of the most iconic British comedies of all time. But Price's polished exterior masked a private life marked by quiet anguish and emotional turmoil. Beneath the tuxedos and tailored suits, he was battling internal wars he kept hidden from the world. The collapse of his marriage and the pressure of hiding his homosexuality in a deeply conservative era pushed him into despair. In 1954, those pressures became too much. He attempted to end his life, an act that was only thwarted by a cleaning woman who found him in time. Although he survived that night, something within him had clearly changed. From that point on, his relationship with alcohol turned from casual indulgence into quiet self-destruction. He began each day with a crate of Guinness and ended it with scotch, often carrying bottles to set in shopping bags. Colleagues spoke of him wandering onto stage drunk, completely unaware of where he was in the play. What had once been effortless professionalism turned into a slow unraveling. By the time liver disease claimed his life, Dennis Price was a shadow of the star he had once been, brilliant but broken. His fall was quiet but tragic. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was the very definition of swashbuckling charm. With his devilish grin, athletic build, and infectious charisma, he soared to fame in roles like Robin Hood and Captain Blood. On screen, he was the daring hero every man envied and every woman adored. But off-screen, Flynn's life spiraled into a blur of excess, scandal, and self-destruction. His appetite for indulgence was legendary. Booze, parties, affairs, and brawls. There were no brakes on the ride he was taking, and he had no intention of slowing down. His Malibu home, which he shared with actor David Niven, became so infamous for alcohol-fueled chaos that it earned the nickname Cirrhosis by the Sea. He hosted wild parties on his yacht and once drunkenly bet $500 he could seduce his co-star Olivia de Havilland during filming. On set, he was frequently intoxicated, slurring lines or missing them altogether. His once chiseled physique began to bloat, and his youthful good looks gave way to a worn, weathered appearance. By his mid-30s, Flynn had already collapsed in an elevator due to heart and lung damage. Doctors warned him repeatedly to change his lifestyle, but he didn't. At age 50, his body finally gave out. The cause was a heart attack, but his death certificate also listed cirrhosis and other complications tied directly to his drinking. Flynn lived fast and flamboyantly, and died just as dramatically. Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed wasn't just a movie star. He was a walking storm. Rugged, intense, and fiercely talented, he delivered unforgettable performances in films like Oliver, The Devils, and The Three Musketeers. But no matter how good he was on screen, it was often his off-screen behavior that stole the spotlight. Reed didn't just drink, he made a spectacle of it. He once famously declared, "I don't live in the world of sobriety," and few would argue with that. His binges weren't just excessive, they were legendary. Reed was said to drink up to 20 pints of lager in a sitting, chased by gin or creme de menthe. He once reportedly downed 126 pints in just 24 hours, ending the night with a drunken handstand on a bar. His antics bordered on the absurd. At a christening, he pretended the baby was a rugby ball. He was spotted climbing chimneys naked, urinating on flags, and drunkenly passed out on an airport conveyor belt. But as much as people laughed or shook their heads, his addiction was far from harmless. Reed's final performance came during the filming of Gladiator. After consuming 8 bottles of beer, several rums, and multiple whiskeys at a Maltese pub, he suffered a massive heart attack and died that night. He was 61. His legacy is complicated, part brilliant actor, part walking disaster. Some admired his wildness. Others pitied it. But no one could ignore it. Richard Burton. Richard Burton had a voice that could command a room and a presence that could silence one. Known for his thunderous performances in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, The Spy Who Came In from the Cold, and countless Shakespearean roles, he was considered one of the greatest actors of his generation. But while the world admired his power on stage and screen, Burton was slowly being torn apart from within. His lifelong battle with alcohol was no secret, it was woven into the very fabric of his identity. He started drinking at age 12 and, at his worst, was consuming up to 3 bottles of vodka a day. During the filming of The Klansman, he was so intoxicated he had to perform scenes lying down. Once, after hearing there were sharks in the water, he drank 21 shots of tequila and Dove in anyway. These weren't just episodes, they were patterns. His organs began to fail early. Doctors warned him repeatedly, especially after a near-fatal binge in 1974. His kidneys were abnormally enlarged, and his spine was found to be coated with crystallized alcohol. Despite multiple health scares, Burton never truly quit. His body grew frail, but he kept going, drinking, smoking, and performing. In 1984, at the age of 58, he died suddenly of a cerebral hemorrhage. Friends and doctors believed alcohol had played a devastating role in his downfall. His brilliance never dimmed, but it was constantly battling the darkness he couldn't shake. Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant was a living legend, literally larger than life. Standing over 7 feet tall and weighing around 500 pounds, he towered above everyone, earning his nickname, the Eighth Wonder of the World. Fans knew him from the wrestling ring, and movie lovers adored his gentle portrayal of Fezzik in The Princess Bride. But behind his charm and gentle nature was a man in constant pain, physically from his acromegaly, and emotionally from being treated like a sideshow. And to cope with it all, Andre drank. A lot. His alcohol tolerance was the stuff of myth. On one infamous night, he downed 119 beers in just 6 hours. On another, 40 vodka tonics. His bar tab during The Princess Bride reportedly topped $40,000. Andre would often pass out in hotel lobbies, and because no one could move him, his companions would simply cover him with a tarp and leave him there until morning. Despite his kindness and playfulness, alcohol sometimes turned him volatile. In one instance, after being mocked, he flipped over a car, with people still inside. He wasn't just drinking to party. He was drinking to numb constant discomfort. His size made surgeries and treatment difficult. The combination of acromegaly, diabetes, and relentless alcohol use took a brutal toll on his body. In 1993, André died alone in a Paris hotel room at just 46 years old. The world mourned him as a legend, but few understood the suffering behind the smile. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart wasn't just a movie star, he was the face of an era. With classics like Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, and The African Queen, he defined cool, grit, and charm for an entire generation. But beneath the sharp suits and cigarette smoke was a man waging a long, slow war against himself. Bogart's drinking wasn't hidden, it was practically part of his brand. Friends often joked, "Bogey's a great guy," until about 11:30. Then he thinks he's Bogart. He was known to arrive on set still drunk or severely hungover. On one occasion, he showed up in his pajamas, refused to work, and spent the day riding a bicycle around the Warner Brothers lot. During the filming of Sahara, he allegedly refused to leave his dressing room until his wife brought him a thermos filled with chilled martinis. And when he drank, chaos often followed. One night, he drunkenly stole a restaurant safe and dumped it in the middle of Beverly Hills. Another time, he ended up in court after an incident involving a toy panda he brought to a nightclub as a drinking companion. Despite warnings from doctors, Bogart never truly gave up alcohol or cigarettes. In 1956, he was diagnosed with cancer, and even as his body failed him, he continued to drink. He died a year later at the age of 57. For all his screen legend status, his final years were steeped in pain and defiance. And now, after seeing all 10 stories, one thing is painfully clear. Fame was never enough to outrun addiction. Fame, fortune, immortality on screen. These stars had everything most people only dream of, but even the brightest lights cast long shadows. For Barbara Payton, it was a desperate attempt to numb heartbreak. For Oliver Reed, it was a lifestyle he wore like armor. For Richard Burton and Humphrey Bogart, it was a slow unraveling masked by charm and talent. Each of these legends carried a unique story, but all were bound by one common thread: alcohol and the destruction it left in its wake. Some drank to escape pain. Others drank to maintain an image. But none of them could outrun the consequences. Careers were ruined. Relationships shattered. Health deteriorated. And in the end, many of them died young, broken, and in some cases, forgotten by the very industry that once idolized them. Their names may still roll in the credits, their faces still grace the screen, but the price they paid behind closed doors was staggering. This isn't just a list of cautionary tales, it's a sobering reminder that addiction doesn't care how famous you are. It doesn't care how much talent you have or how loved you once were by the world. These stars weren't destroyed overnight. It happened slowly, sip by sip, until there was nothing left but a legacy stained with what could have been. What do you think? Were these tragedies inevitable, or could something have saved them? Let us know in the comments, and if you want more untold stories from Hollywood's golden age, don't forget to like and subscribe.